Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Femme Portfolio Podcast. I'm your co-host, Bryn Bradshaw-Mack.
And I'm Rachel Hirsch.
Today's episode is going to be all about a topic that I'm very excited about, and Rachel probably does not want to keep talking about, but it is her baby wellness growth ventures. Rachel, why don't you tell everyone what Wellness Growth Ventures is?
Wellness Growth Ventures is a seed venture fund that focuses on female founders and the female consumer. So we invest in better for you CPG, call it food, bev, and beauty,
Yes.
women's health. So the categories where women own 85+% of the purchasing power.
So awesome. Need more. What inspired you, would you say, to start the firm, and then two, have that focal point?
Okay, so I'm going to say this, and I don't even mean it in a demeaning way. I think it's like a little bit needed from entrepreneurs, but like a fair bit of delusion, quite frankly.
Love it.
Speaking with someone today who, and bless her, she came from a really good place. She was like, no man would say it came from delusion. And she's probably not wrong. I think most founders have to have this like borderline personality where it's like they have to delusionally believe in themselves so much. At any rate, I had like a very traditional Wall Street finance background and I loved it. I loved every piece of it. I never quite found my footing though of like I want to be 90 and working, and sure I don't want to be leading a firm
Love
anymore
that.
till
You're going to be leading yoga retreats at
right,
90.
pass it on to the next generation, all of that. But I want to be like active and involved and just love what I do that much. And so I went to business school over 5 years ago now. Wow, time.
Yeah.
But to like sort of figure out how to find passion in what I was doing. Like I loved the actual activity, but it wasn't fulfilling. And it was during that time that I was hyper focused on like women in the workforce. It was when I went to business school in the UK and they had just passed a law that companies over a certain size had to publish their like pay by gender. It was intended to like
Wow.
the gender gap. And so that was like such a focus for me. And I took all these entrepreneurial classes and I was still angel investing. And it just all sort of came to be from that.
That's incredible. I didn't even know that about the exposure that was taking place in the UK, that you needed to know the gap. I want to walk it back a second and say that I think the reason the delusion comment is so real is I think to do any hard feat, like you just have to embrace a bit of delusion because you're never going to be fully ready. And I think delusion's one frame of mind to say that. But I think that the reason founders will feel that way or entrepreneurs will feel that way is like there's no perfect playbook, as we're going to talk about. And as all of our guests will talk about, if you wait for the right time, the right time's not coming. It's just like rip off the Band-Aid and go do it. But to juxtapose that, what would you say was like most impactful in terms of your work background or like education to giving you the courage to start the fund?
Honestly, I think it was a courage piece more than anything, like a mindset shift, because my skills and my learnings from before were all additive and helpful. But I don't think it was until business school and quite frankly, until like COVID really, when everyone started like these side hustles and everyone became an entrepreneur because we had all this extra time, that I felt courageous enough to do it. And the mindset shift, I think, was a little bit of progress over perfection, which we talk about all
Good.
the time.
Yes, we do.
Being a type A person and being fairly OCD, it was limiting for me. It was like, oh, I never thought I was ready. I never thought I was prepared enough. And like, I needed
Totally.
to execute X, Y, and Z before I could move forward. But that's just not an entrepreneurial journey. And it's just step by step forward. And sometimes it's a few steps back, but you have to keep moving and chewing at it in order to, I don't know, make any progress.
I felt that with the paralysis of like never being ready. And even when we talked about creating this podcast, I'm like, let's just rip off the Band-Aid and we will find out things along the way. And it'll be a little bit of like learning together as we all go.
Yes.
What would you say was like your aha moment of really knowing that you were happy with the decision to start the fund?
Honestly, I don't know. I'm happy that I have it. I'm happy that we're doing it, but I don't know that I still feel I remember when I was ideating about it and I had so many incredible people being like, you should do this. This makes so much sense. And I think like from a bird's eye view, sure, but doesn't matter what my experience was. I had never done like the fund admin operational side of any of this before. Just because I have an investing background doesn't mean that I had done this piece of it. And building a firm is totally different.
Totally.
But I remember I was in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I was bawling my eyes out because my first LP, bless her, she is a superhuman who I had never met before. We had gotten connected like through a network of incredible women.
Oh,
And
love that.
she was like committing capital to me. And we got off the phone and I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm not the person to do this. And it was a friend who was like, you should do this. I believe in you. You can do this. And I think I questioned myself less and less after, like, I questioned myself so much, even now, but less as time goes on. And I remember like that feeling of a pit in my stomach of just like deep fear. And I still feel it sometimes, but I feel more confident that I can figure it out and that we'll figure it out as a team
Yes.
and we'll keep building, we'll keep moving forward. And it's not going to be perfect and it might be messy, but we'll get there.
Love it. I think living through that fear and pushing through it is so empowering. I remember we had this speaker at one of my former jobs, and he is an Olympian, and he was saying that he would always feel so nervous going out to any big meet. And his coach would say, being nervous means you're ready because you know how much is on the line and you know that you've worked hard enough that it's like right within, I know it like felt like that is so spot on because you always associate nerves and fear with being overwhelmed and underprepared. And that's not always the case. Like, as several years in, you can attest to the fear still persists. It's just about managing the voice inside your head and then channeling that
Yes.
energy.
Honestly, there have been a few, funnily enough, podcasts that I've listened to that like have made me reframe how I think about anxiety or fear or whatever it is, where it's not always bad. Sometimes it's motivating
Totally.
in a different way, and to not think of it as negative, but instead like use it as your superpower.
Yes.
You'll notice, I'm sure, I have like pretty bad ADD. And it was
I've
never
noticed too.
diagnosed as a kid because it was like my superpower. I was able to like package it up and be really good when I was focused on certain things. And it's the same thing with like fear and anxiety. It's like I repackage it into like this superpower in a way rather than like letting it take over me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that is so much easier said than done. I'm totally going on a side note here. Did you find yoga challenging at first with like the constant, you know, mind activity? I feel like it's very hard for me to get on my mat and actually be present. I just start running through my to-do list and then I want to like get up and go write things down pretty much every time.
Okay, so yoga is actually physically demanding for me. And because of that, I find that it pulls me into the present moment where it's like,
I love that.
when my arm or leg or whatever it is like twisted and turned and behind my head and I'm like
Shaking.
shaking, yes.
Yeah.
It's like this is the anxiety just happens to dissipate because I can't.
I
I'm going to admit something in this moment, which probably makes me like a bad studio owner, but it's my most creative time. Like I have the most brilliant ideas and I
love
always
that.
like wish I had a notebook because I have such bad ADD. It's like I'm making a list of things. I'm like, this is an awesome idea. This is, and by the time I like get up from Shavasana, I remember like 2 of the 5.
So relatable as well. That's hilarious.
But I struggle sometimes with just straight meditation. So I got into sound baths because for me, it was something
Oh,
to
I love sound
like
baths.
narrowly focus on rather than just like, wow, my mind is not going to be blank right now. There's a million things going on and I'm itching to get up and get out of this.
Totally. Actually, plugging sound baths, I just got the Hatch alarm or like
Oh,
little
yeah.
buddy, sleep buddy. I don't even know. It's an alarm on steroids. They have a whole bunch of sound baths and it's been so short and sweet right before bed. I did one last night. It's so meditative and you get in such a trance that it truly gets you out of the crazy mental. Completely losing the direction. What I was going to ask is in the same vein of yoga and wellness, tell us all like the brands that you're invested in and kind of direction within wellness you're fascinated by.
Okay. 2 totally separate questions. And this is
Sorry.
like, no, it's okay. No, beautiful questions. Asking favorite child. And so I apologize. I'm going to miss some, but Belly Welly, Fishwife, Go Nanas de Soie, Better Booch, Nomatica, Pure
Partake.
Hydration, which you can also use your FSA, HSA for.
We're plugging.
Plug hard. Good Sam, I'm missing some, but I really love all of you so much, and we'll tag all.
It'd be good to break down what some of them are for the listeners who don't know.
Idea. Okay, I'm into this. Okay, so on the better for you food side, we have partake.
I said partake. So wait, I'm interjecting with another story.
Okay,
One of the
great. Go.
times Rachel and we had a standing call on the calendar. I was so excited. I literally got off the call learning about wellness growth ventures and wrote out an entire job description that is still in my drafts
I want
in
to
my
see it.
email. And I need to share it with her, but I don't want her to find someone else to fill the role. So I'm kind of going to have to gatekeep a little bit. But I was so excited because the company she invests brands I love. And the serendipitous moment was she had invested in Partake, and I had just learned all about Partake and stocked up on their cookies in my desk drawer at work. So literally,
Yeah,
I opened my desk drawer to like
shout out
heaps and
Denise.
heaps of Partake.
I
So that
love
was my fun
this.
fact. But break down some of the brands you're invested in and give a little background on what the brands are all about.
Okay, so 50% of the portfolio is better for you CPG consumer packaged goods. So, for example, Fishwife, food, Partake, food, Go Nanas, food, Good Sam foods, like better for you for different reasons, either better ingredients, allergen free, less additives, et cetera, et cetera. Beverage side, Nomatica canned wine, which we can double tap
Yeah.
into that. Not going to change people's drinking habits, but it is like a better for you wine option. Shout out to Kristen. It's so good. I'm not even a drinker and I drink it.
I love that.
Better Booch, Dessois, which is a non-alc option. Cure Hydration, Belly Welly, like probiotic collagen.
So important.
Flouse, which is an electric flosser. Okay, wait, actually, I need to double tap into this story. Okay, so Flouse, think like your Oral-B toothbrush or your Sonic Hair, like what, I don't know. Okay, and it's people still floss like by putting their hands in their mouths. It's so gross. So
I'm
not
one
safe.
of those people.
Well, I'm gonna
Sorry.
say
But I did see your story about floss, or it's floss. And I responded. Yeah, send me one, please.
okay. Bless my father. He is 70 plus. He is wildly young at heart, though.
Something else we have in common, young edgy fathers.
Used my floss. He was super skeptical. He was like, I don't need this. I love my floss. And it is this incredible tool where you don't have to stick your hand in your mouth and it's super taut and it vibrates. I don't even actually, to be totally honest, use the vibrations, but people love the vibration.
Wow.
And it gets all of it out. And then you can recycle the head. And like, it's just like, with your Oral-B, like you change out the head. It's
So
like
different people can have different heads. You're saying I can have one device.
you totally could have one device. So my father's, the best part, he was like very, very skeptical. For a few days he was using it. And then I took it home with me and he sent me an email,
Of course.
an email, can't send me a text, that he misses his flouse. And his biggest question was if he got one, could he use it 2 times? Like, could he get a subscription for the heads twice a day? Because like normally it comes with a 30-day package of heads. He's like, but I would need like 60 for the 30-day time
Oh my
period.
God, the discipline. I respect my dear. No, I thought it was good to break down some of the brands that are in your portfolio. And then I guess this segues nicely into what are some of the broader lens with which you look at investment opportunities?
Oh gosh, this is a big one. Okay, we're gonna have to make this a whole other episode, but I'll give like
Totally. Give it like high level, like kind of is it curiosity driven? Is it trends in the industry? Is it business model? Break it
okay, so
down.
right now I'm hyper
Oh,
obsessed with menopause. So by 2030, the NIH estimates that 50% of the population will be in menopause. And when you really start to unpack that, there's just like not any good options for menopause. Like all women go through puberty, all women go through menopause. Not all women go through like for a fertility journey, but all women go through menopause and there are not any like really efficacious solutions. So I'm obsessed with the menopause space right now and like
I love that.
all the innovation happening there. What's super interesting on that, not to like dive too deep, is that women's cervical fluid is just starting to be studied. So that's like the most indicative piece of information of like what's going on with a woman's body and their hormones.
I had
And
no idea.
I know. And the KEG, shout out to KEG, is this new device that actually tracks it. So they have like all of this data that we can then like study and like actually have efficacious solutions for.
Oh, that's incredible.
Separate from that though is like PCOS. Oh, okay.
PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome.
What's
Break it down
fascinating
more.
is okay, so it's like a new I imagine a lot of listeners have never heard of PCOS before, which is crazy, but it's like a newer thing. I imagine it's actually not new to women's bodies, but it's a newer diagnosis,
Definitely
like
not.
PMDD. Different conversation for a different time. But they're estimating that the size of the PCOS market is the same as the erectile dysfunction market, which is like, I think, a 3 trillion
Insane.
business. And there's, I mean, hell, I think there's like chewable Viagra right now, and there's nothing for PCOS. They're like,
And then it turns out that's the case. And again, I think you'd probably know more from the research, but like all the preventative work that you can do to like alleviate the symptoms. And there's just, it's an intricate
it's so
space.
crazy. And the more I've dug into women's health, the more just like shocking and also not shocking it is. Okay, so I'm going to throw out a few stats that will be like jarring and at the same time also not
We love
surprising.
stats.
Outside of cancer, about 2% of all like doctor type medical research actually goes to women's health. That's changing now.
Yeah,
But
that's crazy.
2%
That's so messed up.
2% of the population, like that's wild shit. Okay, that's number one.
Well, isn't it a huge thing where like women are also left out of so many trials and studies because of our cycle and because of all these factors that make us complicated, even though it's beautiful?
We weren't even included in clinical studies until like sort of recently,
Yeah,
and
that's
we're
fucked.
not always separated out. So like women have totally different responses, even with like cancer drugs. We have totally different responses. Obviously, we have like different makeup.
Yeah,
And but where it's just like it's all the same. Everyone responds the same. But no, it is wild when you start to dig into it.
that is wild. And I think that gives me inspiration behind another question. Aside from women's health, what are other areas within wellness that you think are kind of overlooked or underfunded?
Okay, so I think GLP-1s are more prolific in society than people really realize. And I think the secondary and beyond markets for that are hugely interesting and impactful. I think,
Will you break down really quickly? I think most people know what GLP-1s are, but just generally.
so think like Ozempic, I always pronounce it wrong, but Manjaro,
Yep.
no, what
They don't make it easy. Well, the interesting thing is, and a colleague just taught me about this, is microdosing GLP-1s for other addictive traits. And so,
it's
like,
being paid for so much. But even if its use case is something different, the side effects, the secondary and third and fourth and whatever, all those markets are
yeah,
repercussions, those are still the same. So even if, 100 million people are on it for X and like 10 people are on it for Y, the same repercussions exist for all of them. And so the idea of like bone density becoming a larger problem because, or muscle mass, or the idea of like people are just genuine or less hungry on it. I just
yeah,
made up a word that I started to use and I pulled that one back, but that's fine. People are just less hungry on it. And so they sometimes they're eating healthier, sometimes they're not, but that's beside the point. They cannot eat as much food and they get nauseous if they do. So they're the idea, like, and remember, I'm sure that might predate you, but those like little shakes that
they do not predate me. I know the brand well, and not that brand, but I worked on a comparable brand during my time at JP Morgan, and I was very shocked by the branding, the direction, really what was going on behind the
honestly,
scenes.
I mean, historically, like they're not nutritious. There's no macronutrients. Like the ingredients aren't real. I think when you look up the word food in the dictionary, it's like actually has to be like nourishing for your body. And most things we eat are not nourishing. Can we double tap into like Red 40 for a different episode? Because I'm on
Yes,
my high horse
yes,
on this one. But the I think there is going to be this like really nutritious little shake that becomes a thing now because people need to eat like food as medicine. They need to get their nutrients.
absolutely.
They won't be able to eat. I mean, they might even only be able to have half of a burger before they start getting nauseous. And so the idea of food as medicine, and I think the way we view food is totally going to change. And even the secondary markets in terms of like weight training versus cardio and all of that, I think are going to be hugely affected by it.
Definitely. I think that's also just in terms of trends in the industry. There's always like these ebbs and flows between what workout is like hot and on everyone's mind. I think Pilates is actually sustaining. Reformer is really sustaining itself out there, and I'm here for it. But I think breaking down all of that would be interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So my whole thesis, and people laugh at me all the time, and I don't mean this in a negative way, like I aspire, but like the Soul Cycle core consumer
Oh
is
my gosh.
probably, whether appropriate or not, on GLP-1s. And because of that, they actually can't go to Soul Cycle anymore for a lot of reasons, one of which is like muscle mass, because cardio will make them lose more muscle mass. So they need to be going to Pilates or weight training like that
Oh,
more.
that's
So
interesting.
what used to be like, I think the trend of Pilates reformer like was going to be a cyclical thing, like most fitness is. I think part of the reason it's sustaining is because weight training is finding like so much validity in today's society.
Totally. Definitely plugging weight training right now for all of my listeners, but the
Who is
girls who are
sponsoring
intimidated.
this episode?
Weight training at large, any strength training class or gym. But I want to make sure we break it down for anyone who's curious. Like, give me some more criteria in terms of your investment approach. Just like,
So we
talk to me.
expect to see like a little bit of product market fit. Listen, I think a founder is going to have to pivot dozens of times after we invest, but seeing some sort of like executing ability, I'm definitely butchering like words. It's
No,
like,
you're fine.
okay.
We get it. We get it.
So like I expect to see a couple million top line in revenue. Anything before that is probably like a little too early for us. Anything beyond like 10 million is probably too late for us, just given the
Okay.
check sizes for which we deploy.
Yeah.
How's that?
That's amazing. I have more questions and I want to be mindful of my number one criteria for this podcast is digestible episodes in one walk or sitting or whatever you're doing. But how would you say you look at balancing financial ROI with the impact element of the focus of your fund?
Listen, I have a fiduciary duty to return as much capital to my LPs, my limited partners, my investors as possible. So I really hold the weight of the mandate, the moral thesis heavy, but I also have a fiduciary duty. And so I have to, going into the investment, really manage that. And then as I build a relationship with the founder and as we take a board observer seat or whatever it might be, continue to balance that. And I think that's part of the diligence process, is really making sure there is alignment between our thesis, our mandate, what we're looking for, and the way the founder
Totally.
views the world. I always joke, and like I don't mean it as sick as it's going to come out, but
I'm
some,
nervous.
the investments that we make at an early stage business last longer than a lot of marriages. Like it is a potentially 10 plus year relationship.
Yeah. And that's early on. I know you've been advisors to the companies that you work with, etc.
Like it's grindy. And so you have to, and it's hard to get out of. It's harder than
Yeah,
a marriage to get out of. So because of that, like you have to really get to know someone. And I think not
totally.
just us as investors, only do we have to get to know the founder, but the founder should want to get to know us. Like they should vet us as much as we're vetting them.
Yes, absolutely agree. I think something you said that spoke to me quite a bit in offline conversations we've had is on product market fit and how we're going to do a whole separate episode on how to spot a good investment. But some of the brands that I've come to know and love, you and I have broken down, and you're like, yeah, the brand is amazing, the product's amazing, the quality's there, but it's a niche market and you're one of those people and you're just, die hard about it, which completely makes sense because I get too passionate about all my wellness things.
Right?
But like knowing, okay, like how much can that scale or like what other markets can this start to penetrate? And that is something that I think the consumer is quick to latch on to brands they love. And from your perspective, it's like, we gotta look at this a little more holistically.
We
Zoom
even have
out.
to look at the exit opportunities. And like that's one of my least favorite things, is having to pass on a really strong company, a really strong founder that I think is actually like going to thrive long term. But what I'm looking for is something that has an exit opportunity. And that's part of why I work against myself when I say, like, I don't know that your business is a venture supported business. Like I think there are a bunch of other options that you should and could take,
It
because
is
we're
interesting.
looking for very specific type of exit that most businesses maybe don't even want.
And you're saying like founders who want to just continue to own and scale, like what does that exit look like?
So yeah, so we're looking for like a strategic exit. So like General Mills could be the buyer, or we're
Yep.
looking for private equity to buy them out.
Yeah.
To some degree IPOs, but like really not with too much within the space that we play in, which is different than like a tech investor, for example. But
Definitely.
some businesses are just like really strong, profitable businesses that can grow steadily or even quickly year over year. And they have they just like don't make sense for private equity, or they don't make sense for a strategic, and that's totally okay. But that
Yeah.
doesn't really mix with venture capital then.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Where would you say you see the wellness industry heading in the next few years?
I actually think GLP-1s are a huge piece of it and what we think wellness is and the responses to that. I also think like these buzzwords like longevity or biohacking are a repercussion of us owning our own health and having our own data. Like shout out to Aura Ring for giving us so much information.
Love my O-ring.
Or people are tracking their own X, Y, and Z with little trackers that they get from Target or wherever. So I think all of that will hold people and companies more accountable. Like
Totally.
so many supplement companies are awesome and so many
There's just
aren't.
so many. There are so many supplement companies.
They're not regulated the same way as food, for example, by the FDA. So they can make a lot of claims that may or may not be 100% accurate. But if people are able to test the repercussions with their Oura Ring or with whatever it is, that's going to hold companies more accountable, or consumers
Totally.
start
That's a really
using.
good call.
So I think there's like a little bit of owning your own destiny with all this data that we now have access to.
Plugging a future episode because you said something that made me think of it. We have a guest coming on who just said yes today, who will be breaking down, I don't even think you know this, but who will be breaking down a little bit of the trends and language in the health space and the consumer
Yes,
space. And
love
it is
this person.
so fascinating, like what companies can and can't say, and when they get in legal binds because of promises that they attest to and their branding that are not actually proven. So that'll be a fun one to unpack. I want to chime in on the trend in the direction of the wellness space because I think it speaks to some of your investment choices in the better for you consumer space. And I think the name of the game, at least for me, I feel like I'm really trying to embrace it as it feels like life is getting crazier and crazier, is true sustainability within wellness. So, like simplifying and actually not having your routine get so overwhelming within wellness that it's just not. Now, the brands like Aura is a great example of truly that is embedded in your lifestyle. And that doesn't mean you need to make every decision perfect in order to be your healthiest self, but to be able to mix that into your regular lifestyle. And I love any brand that's just making wellness more accessible and more sustainable. So
With you.
my thoughts on the topic.
I love it.
Switching a little away from Wellness Growth Ventures, but I want to wrap up the episode with this. If you could invest in one area of wellness, like think everything, not just like present day trends, where would you focus?
What a question. I think hormone health.
I knew you were going to say that, and that's a great answer.
That's affected by so many, like not just supplements, not just like that could be food, that could be beverage, that could be lifestyle. Like there's so many different things, and everyone has.
Yes, hormones are hugely important.
Menu.
Okay, and then my last is, what is your go-to wellness hack or just something you can't live without?
Okay, well, I'm going to go rogue on this one. And this isn't a wellness hack, but like a little bit, because shout out to Bubbies, who I've been trying to get in touch with for so long. I am a pickle fiend to the degree that I normally have a background.
I saw this on your birthday.
So embarrassing. Like to the degree that I always have a background on when I'm on Zoom. And for whatever reason, my computer reset and I didn't have a background. And I was on the phone with an investor nonetheless.
Oh, no.
And I have like a lot of pickles because I like all different kinds.
Wow.
All different
You have a pickle obsession.
like majorly. And he goes, "Are you pregnant?" And I was so taken aback because I don't want kids. And I was like, "Where is this coming from?" He's like, you have a lot of pickles
It's
back
a really
there.
specific collection.
Specific. Anyway,
That is so funny.
and bless him, but I love pickles. And little hack is like, fermented foods are so good for your gut.
Yes.
Your own healthy microbiome in your body. And a Bubbies a day keeps the doctor away. They should sponsor this episode. But that's what I always say. And I have way too many pickles a day, like where my dentist is like, you need to stop having vinegar. But Bubbies
I wish you told me this was coming because I have a shirt that just says ferments on it from one of my favorite, from Hawthorne Valley, from one of my favorite ferment brands. And I'm going to wear it on the next episode.
I can't wait.
I love that. Pickles is a sustainable wellness passion. So talk about that.
What's your wellness hack?
Oh, I want to go like so lame and say, like, water really does fix everything. Like, anytime Kevin has a headache, I'm like, "More water." Anytime I'm stressed, water, not feeling good, water, bloated, water, everything water, but that is low-hanging fruit. I just like to plug that everyone's chronically dehydrated. Mm,
That was a good one.
and then I think skincare. My can't live without is, like, an ever-changing, but I have some loyal skincare products, but that we should simplify, so that can be a separate
I'm gonna dig
conversation.
into all of those.
Well, I want to wrap things up by saying thank you so much for sharing all the fun and happenings at Wellness Growth Ventures. And we will be sure to follow up on separate episodes, breaking down a little bit more on like the finance technical. And I would love to deep dive into your investment diligence and strategy a bit more, but wanted to give the listeners some perspective on what you're working on.
You're the best. I can't wait for the
Yay.
next
Thank you. Bye.
one. Bye.